Welcome to the Fintech Times Presents series of webinars. Established in 2016, the Fintech Times is a global multimedia news outlet centered around the world's first leading fintech newspaper. We report on the brightest ideas from the fintech world. Firstly, I'd like to say hello to our audience. Thank you very much for joining us. Today, we're going to be discussing payment technology in gaming. So we'd really like it if you could follow the conversation using hashtag Fintech Times Game Payments and follow us at the Fintech Times. As the gaming market continues to grow, new ways to pay are top of the list for those who are now not only subscribed to cloud gaming alternatives, but also partake in digital collectibles and in-game items. We've got a couple of great people here for today's conversation, and we're going to be looking at the growing surge during the pandemic for payment technology, not only on subscriptions and the physical sports being replaced with esports, but people already realizing that they can make money from the gaming items they win or don't need. So I'm going to invite them all to join me on screen. And I'm also going to start off by asking each of them to give us a short introduction. So hi there, Evan. Can you give me a quick introduction?
Thanks, Mark. My name is Evan Heby. I'm the Senior Partner and Industry Marketing Manager at Tipalti. Tipalti is an accounts payable automation solution that really specializes in helping high growth gaming companies reach the next level of scale and growth. We really focus on companies that have a global orientation and are looking to expand into international markets. And we help them with all of their payouts from tournaments to sponsorships, merchandising, and the whole gamut of the payment life cycle. So really glad to be here and appreciate you having me.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And Konstantinos, could you give us a quick introduction?
So hi, thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Konstantinos Maragkakis, tongue twister for me as well sometimes. I am the Chief Executive Officer for the eCash business unit across the European Economic Area of the Paysafe Group. The Paysafe Group is a large payment group offering specialized payment solutions for people along their entire lifetime. And that includes, of course, gamers who are a core audience for us.
Excellent. And obviously, you know, what we're trying to sort of look at is how things have advanced and developed sort of over the years. Maybe I think, you know, not wanting to say who's the oldest in the room, but the worst person that's been involved in the gaming industry a lot longer. Maybe, Konstantino, you could give us a quick sort of overview of, you know, gaming's moved on an awful lot from when it was a CD that you bought in the shop and you took it home and put it in a game station and played just with yourself, wasn't it?
Well, actually, gaming has evolved since it was, I'm going to use a word that hasn't been said for a long time, in cassettes, in audio cassettes, and you could load them up in a personal computer. And it is true that I think what, in one sentence, the evolution of gaming is from a standalone product that involves just one player in front of his monitor somewhere in a basement or wherever, to a product, a gaming as a service, a continuous service, and the gamer himself or herself actually being part of a broader ecosystem, and fundamentally gaming being now a lifestyle. Gaming is now a lifestyle. It's not anymore just an activity. Only last a week, I was reading this article in the New York Times talking about proper clothes for gamers, apparently, who are now trying to identify themselves from the style of clothes that they're wearing. So we've come an incredibly long way.
Yeah. And obviously, coming to you, Evan, obviously from experience, obviously, as we know, your background obviously in financial services, but from the gaming sort of world, as you've come into it, I guess you came into it at the sort of the high point, if you like, as almost as close as it is as we know it is today.
Definitely, yeah, and I've totally watched that evolution, and as Konstantino outlines, there's a whole aspect to the lifestyle these days. And that goes back to my introduction. There's so many different facets of the gaming world. And one of the really interesting facets that I've been keeping a close eye on is the esports world. And if you talk to people in the gaming ecosystem, they really think of esports as its own little sliver outside of the whole gaming pie. The gaming, according to Newzoo, the gaming economy as a whole is like an $160 billion industry. Of that 160 billion, esports is a very small sliver. I think it's 1 to 2 billion or something right now. but that's growing exponentially. And I think we're going to see a lot of that growth. And a lot of what interests me about the esports side of the house is the fact that there's so many different revenue models. There's so many different ways to make money, and there's so many different people taking advantage of those ways to make money. And on the flip side, there aren't a lot of professionals that have sort of vetted out how to run a gaming business or an esports business on that side of the world. So we feel really well positioned to help those companies kind of reach their next level and next stages of growth by helping them optimize their back offices. And we look to be one of the companies that helps the industry kind of grow up, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an interesting one. Then sort of maybe coming to Konstantino with the sort of at one point gaming was all about sort of the in-player experience, so the gamer itself, which is obviously the area that Paysafe sort of focuses on. What sort of differences do you see in that sort of even using the word more traditional space than sort of moving into that sort of e-gaming sort of area?
So two key differences, I would say, and that also have played a very important role in our business model and how we have grown and evolved and always tried to stay at the top, if you will, of the wave, of the evolution wave. The first one is to repeat, the whole concept of gaming as a service, and looking at games these days, not just as a standalone product, as mentioned before, but rather as a space where players can make purchases and actually need to find ways to spend, if you will, their money safely in those purchases. And in tandem, and I think organically very much connected to that, is also the fact of multiplayer. Of course, just by saying multiplayer, it's a genre in and of itself, and gaming and a concept. But regardless, this whole social interaction, that's how I would put it in this particular context, the interaction between various different players, the teaming aspect, Evan mentioned esports, and I fully agreed with everything that Evan said. I would also add here esports empowering, if you will, a gamer. Because one of the key differences, and I've been asked in various conferences, what's the main difference between esports and traditional sports? And a key difference is that the direct contact that the player has with the sport itself. I mean, you can rarely see an occasion where you're watching a sport and you can actually play it at the same time. And that all, this sort of like social interaction amongst players, their direct contact with the game, all that is creating an even bigger demand supply, first of all, for various in-game services, but also a demand to accommodate different types of payment, if you will, and to enable players to make these payment types relevant to a player and to be able to give them safety, ease of payment, and at the same time, direct access to whatever service they wish to purchase in the game.
It's really interesting. And obviously, after the year that we've had where we've all been dealing with lockdowns and everything else, and I know esports was around and was around in a massive way before COVID. But when, traditional sports that you were going out and playing or going to stadiums to watch, do you think, Evan, that's had a massive impact on the sort of growth of esports in the last year and a half?
I think so. I mean, from the perspective of competition, I think that's something that's really healthy in both, obviously, regular traditional sports. And then now in esports, it's become something where people want to face off against the other best people in the world. So it's become something where it's a human nature to want to be drawn to competition and to watch competitive sport. And just because it's done virtually and via gaming doesn't mean that people aren't still drawn to it. I think we have seen a little bit of a hit as well in esports because there was a rise in kind of those in-person esports events where people would attend and get to cheer on their teams just like you would cheer on your normal sports team. So I think there's been a little bit of a hit there, but at the same time, it's still fostering that community that Konstantino was talking about. It's the ability to get online and play with your friends wherever you are. Everyone has high-speed Wi-Fi these days. Everyone has an ability to get connected to their Xbox, their PlayStation, their PC and start gaming. And it's not only a competitive differentiator and a replacement in some ways for traditional sports, but it's also a way to foster communities and something on the social aspect that's becoming huge, whether it's you're chatting with your friends via Xbox Live or you're just FaceTiming them from your iPhone. That's a crucial part to the game, is being able to talk to your buddies or your pals, friends, girlfriends, whomever it may be, while you're gaming. So it's part of the community aspect that I think is really, really healthy for the gaming world today.
Yeah, and thinking about what Konstantino was saying about sort of like the unique ability to being able to play the game and watch a game. Do you think, from Paysafe's point of view, you've seen an uprise in sort of the merchandise purchasing by gamers as a direct result of the esports, where, you know, a bit like the football model, revenue model, where you want the latest football shirt, you want the latest, you know, skin is obviously what you would the term you'd use in gaming. Have you seen that sort of increase over these sort of last year as well?
I would say, broadly speaking, that yes. I mean, our eCash product, which is a Paysafe card, and that enables players to actually use cash and make purchases online, has definitely seen quite a good year when it comes to gaming. We've seen that across all the major platforms we're working with, be that, you know, Valve and Steam or Blizzard, but also in working with Google Play. Okay, that's kind of a broader, if you will, offer. But generally speaking, we have seen a significant uptake when it comes to in-game purchases, and when it comes to products, if you will, connected to gaming, so to speak, you know, ancillary products. So in that regard, and I would also say that we have seen I fully, again, agree with Evan. We're agreeing too much, Evan, but that's a good thing. But I fully agree with him that esports, okay, has tried to find its balance over the last year in terms of trying to navigate, on the one hand, on the one hand, on what seems to be quite a profitable situation or a positive situation with people, you know, remotely connected and being much more in contact with their monitors and trying to see events, you know, online. But at the same time, esports haven't been have taken a bit of a hit when it comes to issues like you know, real games and real events that have been a major source of attraction and promotion. But overall, I would say our experience has been positive throughout the year in gaming, in terms of sales and in terms of players becoming even more engaged in-game purchases through Paysafe card purchases. So yeah.
Mm. And sort of a similar sort of question, Evan, really on that sort of merchandising, and you know, and you mentioned a little bit about influencers, which is a really another interesting revenue model sort of thing as well. Have you guys seen an increase in the sort of the transfer of payments and sponsorship for those sort of additional add-on services as well to the esports market?
Absolutely. I think the biggest area that we're seeing is international growth. And I think that's the biggest area of kind of an evergreen runway for companies to expand and capitalize on growing their companies even larger than they are today. So you're seeing teams in the US, whether they're esports teams or businesses in the US, expanding into APAC, in the Asia Pacific region, into EMEA, and beyond. And you're seeing a lot of those companies needing the ability to pay international players, whether it's an influencer that's doing consulting type work for you, to grow your brand presence in China, where you might not have a footprint yet, or if it's a merchandise sponsor that makes their clothes out of Vietnam, that you need to pay them for new clothes so that your team is looking really legit. So there are a lot of different aspects from that side to look at. One thing I did want to mention too is that this isn't just happening overnight. I mean, World of Warcraft came out in 2004, and that's really one of the major first what we call nowadays MMO, massively multiplayer online games. And so this isn't just happening overnight. The growth trends of the community fostering, the ancillary items from merch to sponsorships to influencers has been a long game here in the sector over the past decade or even longer. We could go back even further to the 1980s when arcades started becoming popular, but just keeping on topic with the kind of the multiplayer online community fostering and expanding out into those other sections that you're mentioning. Yeah, for sure. I see that international growth as being kind of that next phase. The ease of accessing someone who's hundreds, if not thousands or further miles away from you is so apparent these days that it's almost an oversight to not be thinking about when you're going to go on international, how you're going to do it, and if you have the infrastructure to be able to be successful with that.
It's really interesting. And as you're sort of saying, it definitely isn't an overnight phenomenon. As you say, it's been around for a while. Konstantino, obviously from your experience and Paysafe's experience in the sort of like the gamer side of things, presumably you've seen that evolution over quite a period of time. And that, you know, there is obviously still a need for the sort of the payment element in it. Do you think the main reason why, you know, people like myself and us in the fintech space are now seeing it is because the volumes have just got so undeniable that you have to now focus on it? Or why do you think it's now becoming a bit more interesting to the financial services space?
Well, obviously, definitely it is the volumes, and without a doubt, it is the fact that it's being noticeable. It's no accident that, and sorry if I'm going off a tangent here, but the last time I attended a real esports event in New York in September 2019 in the ESL Counter-Strike there, I was amazed when I was told that two major hedge funds were actually having their board meetings in that arena that day. Because they just wanted to show potential investors the power of esports. So I was truly amazed by that, and I think there is, of course, something there. Very much like what Evan said, it's also the dynamism there. There is still a lot of space there to for growth and for opportunities. But I would also say that this evolution has to do also from the social element of that. You know, the lifestyle, gaming being a lifestyle activity, and being so much embedded in you know, people's daily behavior. And if I may add also one thing, probably coming from me being the oldest in the room, I'll admit it. I think it has also to do with a bit of a, how to put it, of gaming also being recognized as an activity. There was a time when if somebody would say, you know, in their 30s or 40s, hey, I'm a gamer, people would look at him and think of somebody who's still living with his parents kind of thing. Now it's actually hip to be a gamer, even in your 40s or in your 50s. So, you know, there's a mix there. There's definitely a mix between that. And I think these things go in tandem. If I may also add, and maybe that's also a point of discussion, however, there is always a however here, this evolution is, and maybe I'm stating the obvious, is never linear. And it's not, and that's where fintechs, and generally speaking, anyone in gaming, but anybody who's looking at gaming from the outside, we'd like to see ourselves as much more organic as Paysafe Card, because we've been in this space for the last 20 years. But from the outside, sometimes, you know, you think you're seeing a linear progression, but that is not always the case. You have to really be on your toes here, both for opportunity, but also sometimes for potential risk and headwinds that can be in gaming.
Yeah, so, I think it's quite interesting in that respect. And I think I was going to come to you, Evan, and ask a little bit about, you know, that perception that we were talking about, where, you know, gaming's, you know, it's not a real job, it's not a real thing. Do you think there's been, you know, the traditional sort of high street banks have kind of like stayed away from gaming at that time because they were run by people that didn't think it was something that was going to be something important? And has that given birth to, you know, services such as yourself, which has, you know, simplified the process and come in at a different level?
No, totally. You almost read my mind there with that question. So I'll address the fintech side of things first. I mean, on this topic of fintech, it's just so obvious that it's one of the largest growing sectors in the SaaS world today. And it's not only hot from a product standpoint in terms of people's products and softwares are getting more and more advanced every day and being able to handle more and more volume of payments or transactions or better integrations with your accounting or ERP systems. From that standpoint, fintech has kind of been on a rocket ship explosion. So that's one side of things. From the gaming perspective, I heard something really interesting the other day. I was talking to the CEO of an esports company that many of you may have heard of called Talon Esports. And he comes from a banking background. He had a very cushy job in the banking world, and he decided to take a risk to start Talon Esports. And what's so interesting about that, and one of the things he said to me directly was that in the banking and finance world, there's a lot of quote unquote closet gamers. So you see that environment exists. And like you mentioned, like Konstantino mentioned, it's almost a scarlet letter to be a gamer, or previously it almost used to be a scarlet letter to be a gamer, but today it's more of a badge of honor, and being able to be in touch with kind of the younger generation and being able to understand that not only is it fun, but there's extreme growth there, and there's a huge amount of opportunity. And like we mentioned from the top, esports is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to gaming. And that's $1 billion market. So when you compare it to music, when you compare it to Hollywood, I think people would be surprised to know that gaming actually outpaces those industries these days. And that's when you include everything that we've been talking about from a sponsorship perspective to a fashion perspective. And another really, really interesting point that I wanted to mention too was the fact that big brands are getting in on the fun here as well. So one example that I thought was really interesting is Roblox and Gucci's partnership. Last year, Gucci put out 50 new pieces were added to the Roblox market. So we're talking about in-app purchases. We're talking about ways to make those purchases. And now we can also talk about brands wanting to expand their footprint with the younger generation. Let's say I'm a young gamer, or I'm an older gamer, or whatever age I am, and I'm buying a Gucci skin for my online persona. Maybe I want a Gucci skin in real life to match it. So they're growing their businesses in unique ways that maybe people would have laughed at a couple of years ago. But now it's almost like Konstantino said, a lot of people are jumping in, and if you don't think strategically about how you jump in, you could get burned on it. And we've seen that a little bit with some of the larger, like the TNTs, Turner Group, and ESPNs, not necessarily doing it in as thoughtful of a way as some of these other companies. So that's very interesting. And I mean, to the branded fashion, there's also like an opportunity for car brands to put their cars into games, and then when people are going out to buy a car, it's like, maybe I want to match my persona online. So there's a lot of that going into it, from big car companies that have luxury models like Porsche all the way down to like a Hyundai, or other companies like Mazda has dipped deeply into that. So there are a ton of different players getting into it. But I think the caution there is to ensure that you do it in a thoughtful way and in an authentic way, because gamers, more than any other sector that I've recognized, can sniff out the BS really, really well. So you have to do it in an authentic way. You have to do it with your heart in it. And it has to be because you're dedicated to the growth of that industry. It can't just be, we want to make more money, because that'll be sniffed right out and you'll get trashed on and canceled in today's world. So there's no way to do it inauthentically. You're just not going to be successful. So those are some of the key things for us. And I mean, I can talk all day about this, but I'll pause there and we can get back maybe more to the payment stuff a little later on.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting. Just to carry on with it slightly, it's kind of the same sort of idea when you started thinking about, and I think Konstantino mentioned it earlier, when esports sort of first go on, there's a lot of people that, used to run baseball stadiums and other things, and just thought, well, let's just run it exactly the same as we would a baseball match. Let's run it the same way as we would a football match. And that's the ones that didn't really fly particularly well. And it kind of relates to your point that everything needs to be authentic and actually be developed for the gaming market rather than anything else. And I guess that's kind of why Paysafe, as you say, has sort of moved through that and still maintained a heavy presence in that market, because you've learned and you've grown as you've gone along, really.
Absolutely. It's not just about learning and growing. It's also about trying to uh, I know it's going to sound a bit, like I said, I'm very much agreeing all the time with Evan, but it does have to do a lot with authenticity. And going in, we always, our view was always about enabling gamers, to giving them something to facilitate their passion, and that was all we offer. It's simple, but it's original, and it has been recognized by the community. We are a very popular method of payment still and we remain, and we're increasing, as I mentioned before, our presence in the gaming world. We have been in esports since day one. We have been a constant partner, for example, in G2, the team. We were their first sponsor, actually, and we remain to this day committed to working with G2. We've been working with ESL, for instance, always speaking about esports, since we were, again, some of the first sponsors to put our trust there. But it is important to be authentic, to know why you're doing it. And your example, for instance, with the baseball stadiums, and it's a very, very good example. We could see other, just come back to what Evan was saying. He mentioned Porsche, and for example, I think that Porsche's esports concept is incredibly authentic, and they're really great at what they're doing because they are combining these two. They have a clear strategy, but they're also being authentic and being in the right market and offering the very niche service, if you will, to players, and that, I think, is the most important. And I do believe that in that regard, PaySafeCard, our eCash option for gaming, is simple but authentic. It remains so, and therefore remains relevant also to gamers. But that's that. And I mean, if I can add a bit of a pointed comment here, I would say that, and certain firms or anybody who's looking at the gaming space, it's okay if they walk away, if they don't go there. It doesn't mean that, because I also do see that sometimes, in esports in particular, that you have certain companies that come in as sponsors, and when you ask them why, they go, well, because it's trendy. And I understand, the feeling and all that, but it doesn't show coherence, and sometimes that, as Evan said, can burn you. So yeah.
I think it's quite interesting. I think obviously we could probably talk for a lot longer when we're coming towards the end. So we're going to try and move the conversation a bit more into what we see as the future. There was kind of like Evan, for you sort of thinking about that sort of esports, and I'm particularly interested in that influencer sort of market. Where do you sort of see things progressing and moving in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of directions, and I can't say for sure where it's going to end up. Obviously, nobody knows, but there are a lot of trends that we're noticing. So what I've been seeing as a huge uptick, and Konstantinos sort of alluded to this, is the fact that people are aligning their passions with their careers. So you'll see, for example, one of my favorite examples from last year was the number of hip hop artists or rappers that are getting involved with gaming. And that's a passion for them on the side, but also allows them to get exposed to a new audience that maybe wouldn't buy tickets to their concert, but they'll definitely watch it if it's on their PC, on their console or whatever. So that's a huge area I see as an area for growth, not only because it matches the passion of the actual artist, but it also allows them to grow their brand presence in an authentic way with something that they're passionate about. So you could talk about any number of folks, from the Travis Scotts, the T-Pains, Sway Lee, all of these people that are getting involved. And you see it across the sports world too. Like in their off time, professional sports athletes are playing their own games, whether it's the NBA game or the NFL game or whatever or Madden or whatever it may be. You're seeing that they want to get involved with that larger community, and it gives them a way to interact directly with the people that are their biggest fans out there. And that not only makes the fans happy and want to watch their games more and interact with them more, buy more of their jerseys, but it also, as we've been saying and keep hitting on it, it fosters that relationship of a community. And what I really love about the influencer community in the gaming world is that it's a give to get. There's always that mutual relationship of we need to ensure that this relationship works for both sides. It's not just we're trying to make money or we're trying to grow our brand following or we're trying to get more likes, shares, comments, whatever it may be. It's a whole culmination of everything that's encapsulated into that. And from the payment standpoint, I think something that's really important to note is that being able to do and handle all of the payments, all of the business aspects of that without having to think about it and without having to make it complicated makes the experience that much better and makes the relationship that much better. And it creates overall better business synergies. And that almost seems obvious, but it's something that gamers might not have been thinking about as much as other professionals in different industries have been. So that's definitely something that I think is hugely important. And then the last thing I'll mention on that is, as a business, Tipalti, one of our favorite compliments that we get from our users and our customers is that they barely even know Tipalti is there. It's just kind of doing its thing. It's working in the background. And that's exactly what we want to do. Tipalti actually is a Hebrew word. Our CEO is an Israeli founder. The word means I handled it, or so our trademark is we handled it. So we like to be in the background. We love when clients barely know that we're there. And we know that we're accomplishing our main goal of ensuring that their business is running smoothly and that they don't need to rely on a million different resources or manual labor or effort from their AP department or finance department to get the business operations done that they need to get done. So I think it's a multitude of things that go into that influencer community. And it's really one of the most impressive communities I've seen. And I think it's on the backbone of that whole social aspect that we've been talking about throughout this conversation.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's really interesting. Moving to yourself, Konstantinos, I was thinking about, obviously, I don't want to send you down a rabbit warren of digital currencies, but I wondered if, obviously, with the Paysafe integrations, you can pay in cash, you can have your digital wallets and that sort of stuff. Is that going to factor into what you see moving into the future for the gamer experience?
In one word, yes. But the question is obviously how. I mean, looking at the future, of course, it's always about, I'm not carrying my crystal ball today with me, but what I can say in terms of looking ahead in gaming, first of all, it's going to be entirely unpredictable. I mean, only yesterday we saw Google pulling out of, at least for the time being, shutting down their development of big AAA type games. And only a year ago, when they had announced Stadia, the fear was that, if I want to call it fear, that they're going to take over, if you will, the gaming world. So there's always a secret sauce in gaming. Fundamentally, gaming is an art, and it has to be treated and faced as an art. And the gaming community, as Evan also said, is incredibly smart and very reactive. But I think when it comes to gaming and payments, I think we can see two key developments, and I would say one potential headwind and unknown. The two key developments I would see, and I would expect these to move forward, one would be, of course, gaming as a service. And there's no question that this will continue, if for no other reason than the obvious, which is AAA titles. All the big games these days, they cost incredibly crazy amounts of money. They could be like, they are significant percentages of GDPs of some poor countries. I mean, if you look at the budgets for some of those games, and therefore all the gaming developers and studios will require some type of monetization out of it and ways to keep the players engaged in the game, and therefore gaming as a service, which would mean also in-app purchases and, generally speaking, in-game purchases, and this type of interaction amongst players will continue. So that certainly is one thing to watch out for in payments. The second one, I would say, which could go in tandem to this, but I think it is important. I alluded to Stadia before, but generally speaking, I would say gaming being streamed, gaming as a streaming service, the ability, for example, to sit in your living room with your tablet now and be able to play a AAA game. That, to me, is incredibly important. There will be subscription methods there. Here's another space for payments that will grow in importance in the years to come. And I believe that this will be a virtuous cycle between increasing the number of gamers, and people engaged, amplifying gaming as a lifestyle, posing challenges, of course, because it's going to definitely reduce cost for the individual gamer, but that could also mean challenges for the PC or gaming console producers. These are two important developments that I see them continuing. I'm not going to talk about esports for another reason than I do see esports continuing, and I see it as part, if you will, of gaming. However, what I think is important here is that eventually we're going to be seeing, and I'm speaking here from the payment side of things, also more regulatory attention, if you will, to gaming. We are, of course, and we have been, we're a regulated and licensed company in the EA, the entity that I sit as CEO. This is our role as a regulated entity, and therefore we're used very much, to be operating in the regulated space. And that is a big challenge, and that carries significant risks there as well. But I do expect that gaming will see more and more attention. We've had, for instance, over the last 5 years, the case of loot boxes. Okay, that's a very minor, perhaps, issue to the broader conversation about gaming, but it goes to show that, there's going to be ever more attention there. And again, that is a significant opportunity for companies like ours. But at the same time, that's something to always watch for. So overall, I see this pretty positive. And then finally, there is always the unknown X factor. We've seen what the pandemic does. We don't know what effect this pandemic will have on gaming. We're looking at the 2021 as a year with very few AAA titles. We're looking at all these huge delays in the production of graphics cards or of consoles. How will that affect, in the next 24 to 36 months, the entire sector and all that? It still remains to be seen. In that regard, I would say, however, that I do see growth, and I do see an even greater space for fintech. So in that way, I'm incredibly positive about the future.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. We've kind of run out of time, unfortunately, but I wanted to say thank you to both of you for taking the time to spend with me and have this conversation. It's definitely a topic that's going to continue to run, and long may it do so. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you, Evan.
Thanks, Mark. Great to have participated.